All right, welcome to Halitics, and I had just rearranged the entire view because Arlen chose to, I don't know what, get a glass of water or something, cup of something to drink just as we were going live. So
sorry about that.
That's fine, Arlen. And let me also be sorry for those who hear me twice. Although I don't think anyone should. It's just I hear myself twice, and that's very, very challenging. So, all right, Arlen. So let's get right to it. It's Monday. It's the weekend's over. We've got a lot to discuss. And before we get into, by the way, that's a picture of Arlen's website there, the Big Picture Report. It's at, of course, thebigpicturereport.com. Not very hard to find. And his last post there is about the new House Speaker. So we will start with Mike Johnson. But before we do, a lot of news, and it's been really bad lately, Arlen. Day after day, death, carnage, planet burning up. Now we've got, a very extreme right-wing representative in leading the House, that is. So do you have optimism? I mean, you're a bit, not a lot, but you've got a couple of years on me. You probably remember the 60s. I don't. The 1960s for me are kind of a grail, right? A time when we actually, in some ways, came together to fight against the Vietnam War, to fight for civil rights. There was perhaps, my view is perhaps a sense of optimism that we could make society better. In some ways we did. Dr. King's March on Washington led to real change. Do you feel like we have less optimism now, less reason to even have optimism now than we did back when you were a child?
Oh, absolutely, Hal. No doubt about it. I mean, when I grew up, and I often tell people I was really lucky because I grew up at a time where both sides would talk to each other, Republicans, Democrats. They would try to work out some real problems and get things done much more efficiently. And yeah, as far as optimism, there's much less now, and there was quite a bit back then. We thought we could really improve the world and make things better, and then we found out that it's not that easy. And we're just not. We're at a pretty negative place right now. There's so many critical problems that we don't know how to solve, and it's a mess.
Are things even worse now? I mean, my sense is they've really gotten worse. And we may disagree on this, but it just seems, let me say it this way so we don't start an argument over whether the Democrats make things worse or not. Let me put it this way. It doesn't appear that either party is fighting to make things better. And we can agree that at least one is definitely making things worse.
Okay, I'll buy that. That's probably very true. And it's I don't know how we go from here. Just looking at the Republican Party, every single Republican voted for the new speaker, even though the new speaker, said that the election was fake, was stolen. And, several of those people that, voted differently said they couldn't vote for, what's his name? Anyway, the previous speaker.
McCarthy.
Well, I'm thinking of, anyway.
Kevin McCarthy, Arlen?
No, I was actually thinking of the guy who came
Jim Jordan.
Yeah, Jim Jordan, exactly. They said they wouldn't vote for Jim Jordan because he was an election denier. And what do? They turn around and vote yes for election denier. So every single Republican. So we know what side, we know what they think.
But can't the Democrats take some of the blame as well? Shouldn't they take responsibility? They could have kept McCarthy in office not that he's anything special, but probably on balance, not as bad as this guy.
Yeah, this guy looks pretty bad, as did the previous ones. We're just not going to get a good Republican Speaker of the House, no matter what.
I know, but why not? I mean, but if you're going to say this guy's the worst, then why not settle for not as bad?
Well,
I mean, isn't that your argument for voting for Biden in the first place? He's not as bad as Trump would be?
That's where we look at things a little bit differently. I think many Democrats do try to make things better, but I think they're up against the system, and that's the real problem. There's so much money in our political system that that's the only way. Those who have the money get what they want, and those who don't rarely get heard.
All right, let's start with your piece here. You basically just linked to an article. I don't even know what it is, but you can tell us where, Johnson, like so many Republicans, their response to gun carnage, the, multiple deaths, sometimes dozens of people murdered by these weapons of mass destruction that we allow often mentally ill people, such as the Lewiston shooter, to have. His response is, well, let's pray. You want to elaborate on that and why you felt that was worth, just sort of commenting on or pointing out?
Well, it just amazes me that Republicans, MAGA people, don't see the obvious, and that is AK-15s and other assault weapons are, the ones used in the real mass murder shootings. When we have, more than 10, more than 20 or more, that's when you see the assault weapons, and but yet the Republican Party and conservatives don't see that as being as important as the Second Amendment, which they think gives them the right, to own assault weapons, which, that's debatable.
Isn't this a perfect example of what you were saying as well? The power of money. After all, the gun makers fund many Congress members, generally Republicans, but not invariably or only Republicans. In fact, I think Bernie has received quite a bit of support from the NRA over his career. So isn't this just yet another example of big money trumping both what the American people want, A, and B, what is clearly in the best interests of our country?
You're absolutely right, Hal, and it's just a complete mess because there's just not going to be any change with guns apparently, and money does control our political system. There's no doubt about that, and the Democrats use it because, hey, that's the system they're in. So they also use that. So obviously they're not totally innocent either. The only thing about Democrats is many of them try to do good things. I don't know of any Republicans who try to do anything good. They just want to attack Democrats and President Biden, and that's not very helpful.
Well, I spoke last week about the Gaetz-Khanna potential alliance, Ro Khanna and Matt Gaetz, where they both agreed that they're very important to get money out of politics, and that one of their proposals was to end the congressional trading of stocks. And another, this is a Republican, Matt Gaetz, a very conservative Republican from Florida, joining with Ro Khanna, agreeing no congressional stock trading, and also to end the practice of any Congress members going to lobby after they leave office, that Congress members would simply, if by virtue of being elected to Congress, would no longer be eligible to be registered as a lobbyist. This seems like common sense. And again, you mentioned Democrats doing the right thing. Seems like Khanna is supporting the right thing, but so did Matt Gaetz. And it's been heard. There's been nothing heard from House leadership of either party since.
No, it's going to be really hard to break the system as it is now. So, it's just not going to happen without the rest of the country really getting involved and understanding it. But I'm glad to hear you say that Matt Gaetz, supports that. That's a positive thing. I think if we get enough people, then, things could really change. I think also we have to really think about, all those ideas are good, but then we also have to think about the size of how much money you can spend in a campaign. It seems unlimited now. We'd probably have to change the Supreme Court to get anything different, but that's a big one, I think.
Well, there's many things that need to be done, but certainly the practice of Congress members trading stocks is a particularly obvious area where we need reform. And that they also move into lobbying after they leave office. We've seen Democrats like Howard Dean and Dick Gephardt lobby aggressively against Medicare for all because they are receiving millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry, the for-profit healthcare industry in general. So I think we just don't agree when you say Democrats on balance want to do good things, or many Democrats support the right thing. I mean, I liked Howard Dean for a while. I actually liked Dick Gephardt, but the system is so corrupt and so corrupting that they cannot be trusted either to fight for obvious essential reforms if we're going to maintain any kind of democracy or freedoms in this country.
You're right, and it does not look like anything is going to happen anytime soon to change that, which is very surprising. And also, besides Congress having some standards about what those stocks and other things that they invest in, what about the Supreme Court? They have absolutely no code of ethics.
It's awful. It's absolutely awful. And what you see in both of these organizations is the circling of the wagons. So even some Democratic or, court justices seem unwilling, unless I miss something, you let me know, to condemn the obvious corruption of Clarence Thomas and the almost as obvious corruption of the other justices. But Thomas really the poster child for complete control by a tiny number of billionaires over one justice. So we just won't see these very powerful people call out their own. They just won't do it.
Well, actually, one of the Supreme Court justices said she thought they should have a code of ethics. So that's one, but of course, there's 9 of them altogether.
But even if they support a code of ethics, is she prepared to call out Thomas himself as corrupt?
I would doubt that very much. But
this
maybe
is a problem. I mean, this is really a problem. There's this loyalty to the institution, to the party, to the colleague, not to the American people. And that has to change. And I don't really know how we're going to accomplish that. But if you have any ideas, please call in 240-363-7190, 240-363-7190. You're watching Halitics. So great to have Arlen with us. So this is from PBS NewsHour. I never even heard of Mike Johnson. Maybe at the end of this program, we'll talk about another Congress member I never heard of until very, very recently. From PBS NewsHour, just some issues here, Arlen. Apparently, some Democrats have expressed at least grudging, if not optimism. They found a few of the positions that Johnson has taken less troubling maybe than they had feared. So let's get into them. This is not one of those positions. And why am I not seeing you? Okay. So on choice, on reproductive rights, he's very, very problematic. This is, we had a moment in time there where women had control over their bodies. We have gone back in time, and that return to the traditional rule where women just simply couldn't control whether they determined whether they were going to have children or not. It looks like we're going back. He supports a 15-week abortion ban. Any comment on that, Arlen, including the political ramifications?
Well, everybody seems to have different ideas about, when the deadline would be to be able to get an abortion, 6 weeks, 15 weeks, whatever. That they're going to have to come up with some kind of standard that'll work if they're going to keep that. But I think the Democrats are in a good shape on that issue because it's a winning issue. The fact of choice, that people get to decide for themselves what they want to do with their, reproductive options. I mean, that's a good one for the Democrats. In the previous elections on this off here, the Democrats have done pretty well. And a lot of that is because of the abortion ban.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think this will probably redound to their benefit, but it's still terrifying. This issue should not be I don't believe it should be political. I think in the end, there are some aspects of our lives that should indeed be private or should be beyond the power of the government to control. And that would include the obvious, to me, healthcare question: do you choose to continue a pregnancy or do you not? I understand other people feel differently, but that seems to me something that should not be within the power of voters to decide. Let's get to John real quick. Hey, John, how you doing today? Let me unmute you as well. John, you're on. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, fellas. Good morning,
Hi.
Hal. Good morning, Arlen. So you asked right before you asked me to call in. You asked, and I think what we need to do, and this is something I mentioned years ago, but toward what Taylor Swift is doing now, and reaching out to young people and encouraging them to become interested in civics and politics and to vote. And these young people, they still have open minds. They haven't been, they're not deeply entrenched in their own negative emotions. Like adults become, if adults spend too much time thinking that they've been victimized by the other side, they become prejudiced, and it's not likely they're going to change their point of view. They're kind of scarred in a way. But younger people still have the ability to reason. They haven't really been, I don't know. They haven't been deeply offended by, something that may be fact or fiction. And so I think, the only way that you change this, so long as we have democracy intact, and we're quickly losing that, is to, reach out to reasonable people who are willing to be open-minded.
Well, let me ask you this, John. John, let me just cut you off real quick because I have a question to ask you and Arlen.
Sure.
And I'll preface it with a statement which you can dispute. The best way to get young people involved in politics is to get them behind a cause that they truly believe in and feel they can make a difference. And I give a couple of examples: the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement during the 60s, both of which saw very significant involvement by young people. Today, the climate crisis seems to have really activated a large percentage of young people. So do we not need some cause like that? And also, don't we need a champion, someone that they can rally behind in the nature of, or against, in the nature of a Martin Luther King or some other, figure who does stand nobly in support of what they believe, what young people believe in? And
I think you're right, Hal. Those are very important. The way things are now. Anyway, I just agree with what you're saying, Hal. We need those things, and because young people, the polls I've seen have not done that well, and as far as being on the left side rather than the right side. So I worry about the young people, and I think a good cause is very important. And these issues motivate people. So a good person and a good issue could make a big difference.
John?
I think that we need to convey to them that the future will be the future that they build. If they want somebody to get behind, they've got to put that person there and get behind them. AOC is there. I think she represents their interests, and she's, I don't know if she's a millennial. I think she's a millennial. I think that's it, is that you convey the message to them that nobody is going to swoop down wearing a cape and save them. That it's up to them. If they want to save this planet, they need to become politically active. They need to be involved in civics and save themselves from the older generation. And
all right, so John, you mentioned AOC. I just by happenstance have a video of AOC right here. She is weighing in on the Israel-Palestine conflict, and I'm going to play it. I wonder if you believe, after hearing this, that she's the kind of person that this kind of response is likely to motivate people to support her. So let me play it right now.
First things to be said is that there is no way to discuss the conflict with Israel and Palestine without making someone extremely angry. And the idea that 2.2 million people must starve and be exposed to diseases of water and more, the idea that should happen in order to, as punishment for Hamas is wrong. I must also say that Hamas's hostage taking also constitutes a war crime. And what we saw on the 7th of October was an attack that was an affront to humanity.
All right, so does that sound like a rallying cry that's going to motivate young people in the millions to join together in support of full-throated whatever she said? I don't even quite know, but is that someone we can all get behind in your view? Let me start with John, and then Arlen, you go next.
Yeah. So
okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, John. Up? John, you go first, and then Arlen, you're next.
Sorry.
Okay, so I don't think it's really an issue that energizes. I think they have feelings about it. I think they have opinions about that issue, about war in the Middle East. But I think to energize the younger folks, you've got to talk about climate change. You have to talk about wealth disparity, because many of them are struggling to get good paying jobs that will allow them to buy a house and have a future. Those are the things that are going to get them.
I mean, you've seen lots of people in the streets. There have been protests in the United States and all over the world. Young people in New York, Jews. I shouldn't even say Jews. I really don't want to equate support for the murderous rampage by Israel with being Jewish. I know that's what the media does. You're seeing a lot of conflict between pro-human rights activists and, extreme Israeli supporters. It seems like this is a pretty powerful issue, to me anyway, that could motivate people. And what I heard was just a bunch of gobbledygook from there was no moral clarity. There was no speech like you heard from Dr. King when he railed against the obvious evil of segregation and second-tier citizenship for African Americans that did, in fact, motivate people to come together. So, I mean, this is somebody who's clearly part now of the establishment, who's more afraid of saying that something that might offend some people. That's how she even started. Well, there's no way you can talk about this without offending people. Well, offend them then. If you're going to be a leader, then you should offend. Go ahead, Arlen. And then, John, you can have the final word.
I think you're 100% wrong, Hal, because I think AOC was totally reasonable. You only gave her 2 minutes, so she can't cover everything.
That's what she gave. I played her entire clip. That's the entire clip that she posted in when she was talking about this.
Well, what did you have a problem with? Because everything she said sounded reasonable to me. And
I have a huge problem with her starting out by saying that she has. That this is something that's going to offend people. So what? Anything we say is going to offend people. You talk about Medicare for all, it's going to offend the people who own for-profit healthcare companies. Who gives a crap if it offends them? I want to offend them. So that's the first thing. I don't want people worrying about offending bad people who are doing harm. That's the first thing. Second of all, it's an even-handed. She doesn't propose any solutions. She's just like, we feel bad for the people who were murdered, and we feel bad for the victims of Israeli oppression. That's not. Americans young people want solutions to the problem. She should be calling right now for a complete embargo by the U.S. government of any supplies to Israel whatsoever until they stop the murderous rampage against the Palestinians. That's the moral answer. That's the clear answer. That's the answer that would rally people to support her.
If you take a look at her entire record, you'll see so many issues that she's right on. Almost all of them.
No, Arlen, right on. She voted for Mama Bear to be, or she didn't vote. She didn't support any kind of change in House leadership. She has never fought for, in any way, for Medicare for all. She's voted for Hakeem Jeffries to be the House Minority Leader. How is that fighting for the American people?
That doesn't sound that bad, Hal. I mean, it doesn't sound like
it doesn't sound that bad. Is that what you say about Dr. King's work? It doesn't sound so bad what he did. Is that what you say about the New Deal? It wasn't so bad that we put millions and millions of people to work.
Well, I think you're just going overboard, especially on AOC. You know, she is a divisive to a lot of people, and you may not like 100% of everything she says, but I think on 98% of it, I think she's very reasonable.
Well, what is she saying that would cause people to rally to her side and say, we want her to be our leader?
Well, I think she's progressive on most issues without being offensive, you know, like some people are when but she wasn't. She, is very reasonable in everything she said.
All right, John, you go ahead, and then I'm going to let you go.
Okay, so I think you're kind of misinterpreting what she said. I don't think she was saying that she didn't want to offend Hamas or Netanyahu. The people in the voting pool have a lot of really strong feelings about this, and I personally don't, and I don't. I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but she's just saying it's hard to talk about the issue because it's so evenly divided, and there's such a lot of emotion behind it. The other thing I wanted to point out is that, you mentioned that this is an issue that gets people out in the streets. Well, just because they're out in the streets doesn't mean it's going to get them in the voting booth. The Black Lives Matter movement got people out in the streets, and it didn't get them into the voting booth.
Well, who are they supposed to vote for? So, I mean, that's the issue. I agree. These issues are people get in the streets. I mean, and they do. People got in the streets for Bernie, and they voted for him. And he was championing issues that really mattered. It's true he ultimately couldn't overcome the Democratic establishment and the kind of centrist to conservative nature of so many Democratic primary voters who are richer than the average American. But I mean, you if you want to motivate people, you have to take a strong stance on an issue that they care about. And she did just the opposite.
I know what's going to motivate young people. Right now, the Secretary of State in Ohio is purging voters who are, quote, inactive voters, and he waited until a week before the abortion referendum to do it. And it's thousands and thousands of people. He's trying to affect the outcome of this referendum because he knows that his position is not popular. He knows that in the absence of suppression, he's going to lose. Now, because abortion rights is an economic issue, he's lighting off a powder keg. He has no idea what he's going to do.
And taking that position will upset people, but it will also motivate a lot of evangelical voters and a lot of right wingers to the polls. He may lose as a result, but he is fighting for the position that he maybe believes in, or maybe he's been paid to present. I really don't know. I can't speak for his motivations, but what he's doing is certainly popular among his constituents. What AOC is doing is not. It's a nothing burger. And you brought her up. I didn't bring her up in this case. You mentioned her, John. That's why I wanted to play that, because you're saying she's the kind of champion that people can rally behind. But people rally behind people who take strong stances, sometimes very strong and wrong stances. But people who are willing to take on powerful interests, or at least interests that they view as powerful. And that is exactly what AOC has failed to do, despite campaigning in that vein when she first came to office. John, I appreciate the call. I'm going to let you go because it's not really fair to Arlen, but I know we'll talk again soon. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, Arlen.
Yeah, as far as, a leader of the Democratic Party that's going to get, voters out there, I mean, who else would you think could do that if not AOC?
Well, there aren't anybody, but Bernie could. Bernie did, although when he wasn't a Democrat, when he was running for office, because he went out and condemned the incredibly unequal society that we have. And he was also harshly critical of many Democrats. And he did call for bold solutions like Medicare for all, tariffs, an end to the free trade, which was decimating the heartland. Those were issues that really matter to the American people. And he fought for them.
Yeah, I think right now you're going to need somebody that could inspire, optimism and good work. And it's hard to do, but with the issues that we have nowadays, I think young people are not really that involved in politics. And in a way, it's understandable. I mean, if you're thinking that the climate's going bad and nobody's doing anything about it.
Well, they're not, right? I mean, that's true. The young people who say both parties are to blame for the climate cataclysm, for the new Holocaust, they're absolutely right. So who are they going to follow? Who's calling for an immediate move away from the fossil fuel industry? Who's saying we've got to tax carbon right now? Nobody. Joe Biden just green lighted the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and the guy that he tapped to lead the support for the dirty debt ceiling relief deal, Hakeem Jeffries, had unanimous support from the Democratic Party. So who are the leaders who are taking on the fossil fuel industry? Who are the leaders out there who are taking on the for-profit healthcare industry that's destroying our country? Who are the leaders who are taking on the warmongers?
Well, there's no doubt about it. More could be done and more should be done.
Is anything being done? Not more, anything. Who?
Well, these things are not easy to solve sometimes. And
was segregation easy to solve? Was the Great Depression easy to solve?
No, they're all hard to solve. Any new change is going to be hard to solve in the kind of climate we have now. But it's hard to get people motivated when everything looks so difficult. I think they would probably, a lot of young people probably say, I don't want to deal with all this stuff. They're all crazy, and they go on to other things.
Well, are they wrong? It's not even that they're crazy. They're corrupt. They're not on the side of young people. Who's not? I mean, there was real movement for Bernie, right? I mean, he got tremendous amount of the youth vote. And he's now basically gone over to the establishment. He hasn't called them out. In very few instances, and even to the extent he does, the guy's in his 80s. He's simply not in a position to lead a youth movement. So who, even giving Bernie some credit, John mentioned AOC. I just played a clip from her where she was completely unwilling to take a bold stance, and she doesn't. She won't. She wouldn't take a bold stance on the House Minority Leader, which is an incredibly important issue. Because whoever's the House Minority Leader is almost certainly going to be the next House Speaker when the Democrats take control, if they take control.
Hakeem Jeffries was the one that the Democrats decided on and they wanted to have. So anybody that would go against him, it wouldn't be very helpful.
Well, why not? Why wouldn't that be helpful? Isn't that what we need? If you're going to nominate a House Speaker who's going to make things worse, because you said Democrats want to make things better, but there's no question Hakeem Jeffries makes things worse. So how can we say Democrats want to make things better if they, in lockstep, support a guy who gets so much funding from AIPAC, which kiboshes any criticism whatsoever of Israel, and gets huge contributions from the financial services industry, which has a stranglehold on our country and our world?
I just think you're being unrealistic, Hal, and expecting way too much.
Well, I mean, I'm just asking you, why would young people support anyone in the Democratic Party if that's their position?
Well, I don't know if all young people are progressives, for one thing. I mean, there's
not. And some of them would say, hey, abortion is wrong. It's immoral. So I'm going to support the party that fights aggressively to ban it, like that guy in Ohio. Like the Secretary of State there in Ohio.
Yeah, people are going to do whatever they want to do, like on abortion. But if you want all of the young people to get motivated and to vote en masse and protest,
we can't do that. No one can make all. There were young people in the 60s who were for the Vietnam War and who were against the civil rights movement.
I think AOC would be the most logical person. For me.
Well, why? What has she said or done that you think demonstrates that kind of charisma, that leadership that would cause people to rally to her side?
Well, she's been very reasonable on just about everything, I think.
But do you think being reasonable is the way to rally people?
Well, you may have an idea different than she does about what's the perfect thing to say, but I think on most things she comes across as progressive. She obviously makes the right wing very upset because they're always talking about her. So she just seems a logical person. There may be somebody else that would be fine. I'd like to find that other person, but AOC certainly should be considered as a leader of the young progressives in Congress.
Well, let me just make one final point on this, and then we can move on. It is true that many right-wingers use AOC as kind of a scapegoat or a sounding board. There's a word for it, but I forget what it is. But don't forget that the right wing has also used Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton as sounding boards as well. And both of them, and sounding board is the wrong word. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble figuring out what it is. But they've used these center-right Democrats who are corrupt and who are supporters of the military-industrial complex, Wall Street, who've enriched themselves at the public trough. They're often criticized as well by the right wing. The fact that the right wing criticizes you doesn't mean you're a great person.
No, but if you often turn up the name a lot and cover that person a lot, like they do AOC, more than she probably deserves, then that's going to happen. But I just don't know that there's any perfect issue to get behind, but some of the good ones obviously are abortion and climate change, and they certainly should motivate a lot of young people.
All right, Arlen, thank you for that. Let's get to, I guess, unless there's anything else you want to talk about, Mike Johnson, I have a few other slides. He does support aid to Ukraine, but he is also saying that we have to put everything on the back burner behind, massive support for Israel. Any thoughts on that? He wants a standalone funding bill for Israel. He's taking support for military support for Ukraine. He wants that out of it. He wants everything but just a standalone bill for Israel.
The funny thing about Michael Johnson is that he is very much like Trump and any other right winger, Matt Gaetz or whatever. He thinks all the right wing plans are the best, and it's just a unfortunate situation.
But isn't this what Democrats want too? Don't they want massive support for Israel? There's no, as far as I know, there's not one Democrat who's expressed opposition to a huge package of aid to Israel to, I assume, help them kill more Palestinians.
Well, they do need our support apparently, and I think Congress has pretty much agreed to give them that. Although the right-wing Republicans are sort of challenging some of that, which is a shame because I think the Ukraine war is something that's very much obvious what side we should be on, because we don't want to be on Putin's side. We don't want him to keep gaining more territory and wanting to overthrow more governments. So, but
well, we disagree on that vehemently as well, Arlen. But given that I don't support more aid to Ukraine, should I, under those circumstances, appreciate Mike Johnson for at least only supporting more aid to Israel, which I also oppose, but at least he's not also right now calling for more billions that we could use at home to go to kill more Russians and ultimately lead to more Ukrainian deaths as well.
There are more Republicans who, feel that way. But basically, I think everything is baked in pretty much. We're going to support Israel, but we're not going to support, humanitarian disasters either. So, that whole problem in the Middle East is really impossible to solve very well. There's no good way to solve anything. You do one thing and something else bad is going to happen. Whether you, go in harder, whether you have a ceasefire, there's problems everywhere. So there's no easy answer.
But Arlen, I agree with you to an extent, but we're not we're sending troops to the Middle East right now. And we are providing apparently billions in aid to Israel. We're going to vote for it very soon. And I think it's going to get virtually unanimous support. Maybe someone like Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar will vote present, but they're not going to make a big deal about it. Bernie's already signaled he supports this. Isn't that I know you're saying there's no easy answer, but isn't this clearly the wrong answer? Shouldn't we at least say we're not going to fund an Israeli invasion of Gaza? We're not going to fund more killing of Palestinian children who weren't even born in 2006 when Hamas last was elected in any way was support from a plurality of Palestinians. Shouldn't we just not do that?
Well, Israel was attacked very brutally on October 7th. And, the American people saw that and they think that, there should be some action taken. But obviously, it looks like right now that Israel's getting a bit too carried away and a lot of humanitarian problems are developing and innocent people are dying. And, that's not a good thing.
No, it's not. Here's over the weekend.
Stand back! Bring them back! This evening, the hostage families demonstrated in Tel Aviv before their representatives met for the first time with the Israeli Prime Minister. Many are desperate for the ground invasion and bombing to stop. But tonight, the Israelis were bombarding Gaza again, even as ground forces remained inside the Strip. Weakening Hamas, no doubt, but bringing more devastation and death to Gaza.
All right, so you hear it right there, Arlen. The hostage families don't even want this invasion. They're against it. They don't see it as likely to bring their loved ones home. And they recognize, as you just did, the humanitarian... it's the atrocities that Israel's committing. So let me say it this way. I know you believe, I truly know you believe in your heart and that Joe Biden has good instincts and cares about the American people and cares about people. How can you square that with full-throated support for what can only be called, I don't like the term genocide because I think, except in very rare instances, but they've herded the Palestinians into a tiny little strip of desert against the Mediterranean. They're dropping bombs on them. They told the Palestinians to move to southern Gaza, where the Israelis are pummeling them there. Now there's a ground invasion. So I don't like the term genocide, but I understand why people would use it in this context. How can you look at that and think Joe Biden is the right choice for our or a good person or someone who cares about humanity or doing the right thing?
Well, we don't know what he's saying to Netanyahu, behind closed doors, and hopefully it's to watch out for these humanitarian problems. But another problem in Israel, I think almost all the citizens do want this attack on Gaza, because they've seen what happened, just like we did after 9/11. We're just all want to just attack every Arab possible. So. It's the same kind of thing in Israel. They want some revenge, and unfortunately, Israel is going a little bit too far on exacting that revenge.
Well, I mean, a little bit too far. I can't. I mean, that's quite an understatement, I would say, Arlen. And it's not even an appropriate response. I don't know where the American public was prior to the Bush-Cheney invasion of Iraq. But my sense is that we were not unanimous or even close to supportive of that. And of course, Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, just as the Gazan civilians that we're killing now, or that Israel is killing with our weapons in many cases, had nothing to do with the Gazan attack on Israel. And I would make one other point. Why is it so hard for people to say, if you want to go overboard, arguably Gaza went overboard when they started killing 1,000 Israelis. That was awful. I mean, it's a horrible thing that it happened. But why can't we say, well, but this is what Israel brought on herself by 30 years, however many years you want to go. You want to go back to 48? I don't know if I go back that far. Fine. It does. For 20 plus, more than 20 years, they have been encroaching on areas where Palestinians live. They have kept them in dire poverty. They have herded them into a tiny area. How can they be surprised that a militant group that represents those people would respond in the way that they did?
We're all in sympathy with at least I am, and you are in sympathy with the Palestinian people. They've had it rough for a very long time, but people are not going to think of that right now. They're going to think about what happened October 7th and how do you respond to something like that. And there's going to be a lot of division on that. But
then shouldn't, to the extent that that's how some people feel, isn't it up to President Biden, who's not an Israeli, whose family was not attacked? Isn't it up to him and others in our country to say, no, this is wrong. You're doing the wrong thing, and you've been doing the wrong thing for so long. And right now, this is the opportunity to prevent future death, to take your foot off the Palestinian throat, not to stamp down even harder.
Yeah, I would like to see that too, but Joe Biden's not going to do that because it was Israel that was attacked, and we're the ones. Well,
shouldn't he though? But shouldn't he? You think he's a good president? You think he's the right person for the job? And in a crisis like this, don't you expect the president that you support to do the right thing?
In a situation like that, it's very dangerous for Biden to go beyond what the party leaders and other people want. I mean, he's
the party leader. He's the leader of the country.
I know, but if he went what would seem like against Israel, then that's going to be he's going to be hurt politically on that very much.
Well, don't you want a leader who's willing to take a political risk now and then to do the right thing, especially if it means saving or saving thousands of lives or preventing them from being killed?
Yeah, I like to, the thing is, Joe Biden is pretty old, so he's not going to do anything too radical. We really do need some young people in there that will do the things that you're asking them to do. And, I would be happy with that too. But apparently Joe Biden's not going to be that person.
All right, Arlen, you brought this article to my attention. This is by Nick Kristof in the New York Times. Already showed a clip from it. You found this quote, it's not a quote, but this passage from Kristof, powerful. You cited it. So this is where, and I wasn't aware of this either, although it doesn't shock me, Ehud Barak, former defense minister in Israel, saying that Bibi Netanyahu had actually approved the transfer of funds to Hamas with the idea that this would empower the extremist group and make it harder to have peace with Palestine.
Yeah. It's interesting that the media doesn't talk about this, the fact that Netanyahu is actually supporting Hamas, and it hardly ever gets talked about, but it's really awful when you think about it. I mean, this is a terrorist organization, but he's giving them money because he doesn't want a two-state solution, and he figures that's the best way to do it. It's all crazy. But I'm glad, though, I think Netanyahu is not going to be a leader very long. I think his popularity is going down real fast, and that's the way it should be.
Okay, we've got Arlen with us. It's Halitics. I didn't even state this to begin the program, but please do click subscribe in the bottom right corner of your screen. We've got about 10 more minutes. It's always great to have Arlen on. Usually we get into it a little bit. Today we got into it a lot. I feel very, very strongly about this issue. The lives that are being taken, the harm that's being done to the Palestinian people, I lay almost completely at the foot of Israel and her supporters in the U.S. government, and I'm just simply unwilling to give them any pass whatsoever, any kind of excuses for their behavior. To me, it's reprehensible. It means we are living in ourselves a terrorist state. So that's why I take such a strong position.
Well, you're right.
I'll let you respond to that, sure.
It's right to be passionate like you are. In fact, you remind me of a lot of people I knew in the 60s that, were very passionate and said things pretty extreme. But, this is what what you're asking for is reasonable. And I hope we can get it. I think the way the political climate is right now, that's going to be really hard to do, with like we talked about, money really controls politics. The rich are the ones that control politics. And, that's why a lot of these things are not going to change very quickly or easily.
Yeah, it is really, it's a very horrible state of affairs, and really is leading to our ultimate demise in short order. Just a couple of comments I want to get on. Well, let me show this. This is also, Arlen, from the Christoph piece that you brought to our attention, which I do appreciate. And why am I having trouble with this? Sometimes it will arise. So just want to show the slide deck. Here we go. So this is, again, from Christoph, where he talks about how bad things are, or he writes, I shouldn't say talks, he writes about how bad things are in Gaza right now. The civilian toll has been horrendous, and the suffering is set to get much worse. He points out that 20 journalists have been killed. He doesn't mention the death toll. I have it at over 8,000 today. So many killed, and it's going to get worse. To me, again, you're seeing an understatement here. You're seeing an understatement from Christoph. He's not really prepared to just call what Israel is doing in Gaza atrocities. Likewise, AOC was pretty measured in her language, which I found very frustrating. And again, an example of why she's not a leader. Is this the power of AIPAC? Is this the power of the pro-Israeli lobby? The amount of millions of dollars they spread around like fertilizer to get politicians both on the right and the left in lockstep support, not only in support of Israel, but to kibosh even of the most moderate criticism to the point where they can't even call for a ceasefire.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. It's a situation that, what's the answer, Hal? I don't know the answer. Every possibility is fraught with, bad possibilities too.
Well, I mean, I think their policy answer is what I said. We don't give any more money to Israel. But the political answer is you vote for Cornel West for president. But I know you mock that, so I disagree with you, but fine, you're allowed to have a different opinion. So let's go to this. What about voting for this guy for president? Dean Phillips. I mentioned that one representative I had never heard of until a week ago was Mike Johnson. Another representative I had never heard of until yesterday or 2 days ago is Dean Phillips. He is from Minnesota. He is running for president on the Democratic ticket. Here he is.
A whole bunch of polls this year found that large numbers of Democratic voters want to see someone challenge President Joe Biden for the party's nomination in 2024. Well, now Democratic Congressman Dean Phillips is giving people their wish. He's telling our Robert Costa that he is indeed getting into the presidential race in a TV exclusive. Bob, good morning. Why is he doing it?
Good morning, Tony. Well, Congressman Phillips said his decision was driven by his fear that President Biden could lose to former President Donald Trump. And he's also asking other Democrats to consider getting in the race.
Are you running for president?
I am. I have to.
Congressman Dean Phillips, a Minnesota Democrat, is launching a bid for the White House. Even he calls a long shot, taking on an incumbent president he still praises.
I think President Biden has done a spectacular job for our country, but it's not about the past. This is an election about the future.
Phillips, a 54-year-old former business executive, believes President Biden is on pace to lose to former President Donald Trump and needs to be challenged for the Democratic nomination.
I will not sit still. I will not be quiet in the face of numbers that are so clearly saying that we're going to be facing an emergency next November.
Recent CBS News polling shows a Biden-Trump rematch would be a jump ball politically, and that only a third of voters are sure Biden would finish a second term.
All right, so there it is. That was a lot in that, Arlen, but I played it because I thought it was pretty good. It was pretty dense. They provide you with a lot of valuable information in there about Phillips and why he's running. And I want to ask you about it. We have a few more minutes, but I also just want to quote CG in the live chat. And before I read, I just want to say, regardless of what, I don't even know what CG is going to say. I just see that they posted something here. So I don't know where their position is, but totally agree, Hal. Okay, who could have seen that coming, that I would just out of the blue read something where the person totally agrees with me? I mean, it's nice to know, CG, thank you.
That's
and
amazing.
Again, I'm going to be totally even-handed, and if somebody writes totally agree, Arlen, I would likely just as possibly read it.
Well, I think you would probably say that everybody on your site agrees with you. And if they don't, then you take them away.
That's not my site. That is the YouTube channel that anyone is totally open to the public, and also has your picture on it. By the way, your picture is right there just as much as mine. So we are, CG just happened to, for whatever reason, agree with me. So I think we really don't need to go any further, but let's go further anyway. I was struck by much about this Congressperson Phillips' comments and why he's running. But before first of all, he makes the point that it's or the CBS makes the point it's a jump ball, right? At least the polls show that. And Phillips says he really admires Biden and thinks he's a good president. So it's not about policy. Is this just because, and I thought, and I'm taking a long time to get there, the final comment from the CBS commentator was that most Americans don't think Biden will finish off a second term if he's elected to it. Does that mean this is really about Vice President Kamala Harris? That she has struck fear in the hearts of the Democratic representatives in Congress, and they believe she will drag down the team, the ticket, and they need someone else because she was such a bad choice by Biden.
I don't know that she's that bad of a choice. She was
but that's what the perception is. I'm not. Is that the perception?
But also, the right wing attacks her viciously because, for one thing, she's a woman, she's black, she's got another ethnic background. So, anyway, Fox News and all the right wingers have been just attacking her, and as they would probably attack anybody, to an unrealistic position. I think she's a pretty smart lady, and I think she could be a good candidate.
But is that the fear that these reps have? Is that why Phillips is saying, I've got to run, and so should others? Because they believe, rightly or wrongly, whether it's fair or not, that Kamala Harris is an anchor around the neck of Joe Biden and therefore the Democratic Party.
Well, of course, the problem is somebody like Kamala cannot, run apart from Joe Biden. So Dean Phillips is saying, hey, I'm going to give everybody an alternative, at least, somebody to, go against Biden. And, that sounds reasonable to me.
Did you know who Dean Phillips was?
No, I actually don't.
And will you consider voting for him in the primary?
Oh, absolutely. I'll have to find out more about him, but if he's, reasonably progressive, reasonably liberal, then I would support him. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to mention there was a Maine representative who I thought went out on a limb when he went against his previous position and said that he thinks assault weapons should be banned, and he apologized for voting for them to be around prior to this.
Well, remember, Maine just suffered the worst mass murder in its history, and and also maybe that representative really is just showing real integrity and some independence, which is so lacking in Washington these days.
Well, he is a Democrat. It would mean even more if he was a Republican, but we'll still take it.
Well, Maine's a gun-owning state. I doubt he put himself. Was that Jared Golden? I'm trying to figure out who it was who said.
Yes.
So yeah, Golden's a centrist Democrat, but his seat is safe. Let's put it that way. His seat is safe.
Too many seats are safe everywhere.
Most seats are safe, right? Most seats are safe these days. It's tough to find anybody who really is at risk. And given that fact, why aren't they more willing to stand up and be counted and presumably take a position that maybe their party bosses don't like?
I suspect they're just happy with the way things are, Hal. They've got their power, they got their money. They don't want to risk any of that.
Well, you sound like me, Arlen. I don't know why you're not taking my policies here, but we'll figure. All right, we're at the end of the hour. It's always great to have you on. I appreciate your understanding my passion, as you put it, my emotional response to a degree, although I think it's based on reason. Do you, before we let you go, though, two things. I want to circle back to what we started, which was the depressing times we live in. But there was a comment on in the Facebook group about people who or sources that you trust. And I'll start with myself. There's no source that I truly trust. I mean, there's some I take seriously, and if they say something, I'm going to look into it. Especially if it surprises me, I'm going to look very closely because I believe in what they say. I'll give you an example. Aaron Monte from the Gray Zone, I think, has demonstrated remarkable consistency when it comes to being right on foreign policy. But if he says something that I think sounds like it might or might not be true, I'm going to verify it. But he's about as close as anyone comes to being someone I rely on and take it at their word. Is there anyone that you or any source that you read and you're like, oh, it must be true?
No, there really isn't, because there's always going to be, exceptions. So what I try to do is just kind of research things myself and see, who sounds the best, who's done some work and figured things out the way that things should be.
All right, Arlen, anything you want to finish with in terms of perhaps having some hope? Because I know you've said it's good to smile when you're doing your live stream, which I agree with, and try to communicate some positivity. I know my recent couple live streams, I have been seeing some slow but somewhat steady growth. Lost a couple of subscribers lately. I think my criticism of Israel has not gone over well in some quarters, but I'm not going to pull back on it. But I think being pessimistic, unfortunately, doesn't always reach people. Well, maybe that's good, but you got to tell the truth as you see it. I wish I had something more positive to say. Do you have something positive to say?
I can't think of anything positive except that Mike Pence stepped down, which was a good thing, and that Donald Trump is really having a lot of tough time legally, and he's saying crazier and crazier things. He was saying that the leader of Hungary, what's his name again?
Viktor Orban.
Viktor Orban, was the leader of Turkey, and he just makes those kind of mistakes all the time. I think he's losing it because of all the pressure that he's under. So I think that's a good thing in that I think he's not going to be the Republican nominee, in my opinion.
I think he will be the nominee, but I still think, despite Dean Phillips fretting, Biden is the odds-on favorite to remain president. Thank you so much, Arlen. Great to have you. It's always a pleasure, and I really appreciate your class. I think I've muted him, so he did say thank you. We'll be back, or I'll be back tomorrow.